But I was reminded this week of how important it is to be able to see clearly. I have a friend. He used to come here. He used to be a part of our church. They live in Wyoming now, and he's a few years older than me. And he got up in the middle of the night, as old guys do, and went to the restroom. And apparently, the house he's living in now, he couldn't see very well when he was going back to his bedroom, and the bedroom door is here, and the stairway to the basement is right here. And 2 o'clock in the morning, thinks he's stepping into his bedroom, and he was stepping into space. Can you imagine? Couldn't see. Next thing he knows, he's hitting 13 steps down to the basement, and he's okay. I mean, he's beat up a little bit, but he's okay. His daughter's father-in-law, that was how he died. Busted his neck, falling down a flight of stairs and stuff. To not be able to see clearly is really dangerous, right? We need our vision. We need to be able to see. And Jesus came into this world, okay, to give us a way to see, a way of seeing reality that's different, okay? And he came into a world that he loved, okay, to rescue it from sin and the putrid effects of sin. Do we see the crud in the world these days? Huh? I mean, think about it. I got a, I'm with the sheriff's department. I got a phone, 2 a.m. phone call. A deputy's wife had died in the middle of the night. And we've had 3 suicides in the department this year in 5 months. It's crazy. There's a lot of suffering out there. There's COVID. Remember COVID, right? Remember the lessons we were supposed to learn from COVID, okay? That a lot of us didn't learn, and we made it a political fight and all this kind of stuff instead of like, wow, we're vulnerable. We're vulnerable, every one of us, and school shootings. Are you kidding me? Grocery stores. Is there any place that you don't have to be packing? Wearing body armor, or stuff. I mean, there's just so much stuff going on in the world, and that's why Jesus came, okay, to fix what's wrong. We're going through Mark's account of Jesus' life, and part of Jesus' mission was to explain the invisible God, to give us a different way of seeing our life, and he wants to explain that to the pinnacle of his creation, human beings. Wants us to get it. And when you look at Mark's account of Jesus' life, the whole middle section of the book, okay, what you see is Jesus is trying to pound into his disciples' heads what the right way of seeing is, and they just are not getting it. They just don't get it. Chapter after chapter after chapter. And we're going to look at some of that today. And Jesus was really getting frustrated, okay? And here's why. The ancients, okay, had this annoying tendency to value their opinion more than his opinion. Can you imagine? They were trying to get Jesus to align with their ideas, okay, and to rather than them aligning with his ideas. And what was going on in the culture of the day is there was a culture war going on in Israel during that time. Okay, and they were sure that Jesus was going to join into that cultural battle, okay, and that they were going to be able to counter the cultural drift that people were seeing in their culture, and Jesus was going to stand up, because the Greeks had come, the Romans had come, and they brought in all these outside influences, and they barely recognized their country that they were living in anymore. Can you imagine? People having that idea? Okay, and the Romans even wanted them to have allegiance to their emperor, with expressions of loyalty, following certain Roman laws and paying taxes to him and stuff. And this political and cultural change really rubbed people the wrong way, really did. And there was many that were sure that Jesus would use his popularity, his influence, his magical powers, okay, to right the wrong and to create this Israel first agenda. Can you imagine people having those kinds of ideas? Their society was divided. It was fractured along political lines. And there were liberals, even back then. There was this group called the Sadducees. Okay, they were absolute liberals. They were sellouts to the Romans. Theologically, they were liberals. The way you remember with the Sadducees, what they believed, they were sad, you see, because they didn't believe in an afterlife. Okay, they didn't believe that the soul went on. All you got was what you get in this life. Can you imagine people walking around thinking that? Okay, and then on the other side, okay, there was this group called the Pharisees. They were the conservatives, the cultural conservatives and stuff, and the religious right, if you will, and stuff. The Sadducees and the Romans were the ideological enemies of the Pharisees. Okay, but what they did was when it was politically expedient, the Pharisees would cuddle up and align themselves with these other groups who they hated, but they wanted to get their way in the culture, and so they even plotted murder to achieve their moralistic goals. Can you imagine people doing that? Okay, so what Jesus dealt with in the ancient world was crazy. Aren't you glad that us moderns never act that way? Never, right? So Jesus came into a world that he created. He came into a world to create a new movement, okay, that was going to be marked by things like acceptance of others, even when they disagree with you, okay? That it was going to be marked by compassion, by a commitment to truth, and a commitment to service to other people. These kinds of values. And Jesus knew he was going to leave the scene. And he knew that these disciples of his, these 12 guys especially, but there were women, there were other people that were part of this group as well. He wanted to make sure they were crystal clear on the message. They had to be crystal clear on what it is that he was trying to bring in. And he wanted them to leave their preconceived ideas, okay, and embrace fully his vision, his point of view, okay? And I'm telling you, Jesus needs people to do that today. Amen? Amen. The middle chapters of the Gospel of Mark describe how Jesus is trying to get his followers to see the world in a different way, but they're blind to it. And they're having a really hard time doing it. And he wanted his people to let go of their preconceived ideas, okay, and to see something different. So I want to kind of just walk through a stretch, okay? It's mostly Mark chapter 8, okay? Mark is 16 chapters, so we're like right in the middle of the book, okay? And Jesus, the setup was this. We've talked about this already before, but one time there was 5,000 people gathered around. Can you imagine before sound systems and stuff like that? I mean, I got 2 microphones on right now, in this little place, okay? 5,000 people had spent a bunch of time with them, and before they left, Jesus says, everybody's hungry, guys. We got to feed them. And his disciples look at him and think, like, do you know how much that would cost? That'd be like a half a year's wages to feed we're really supposed to cough up that much money? Like we're just going to go to the ATM or something like that? And how are we going to do that? And he goes, what do you have? They looked around, they found a kid's lunch. A couple loaves of bread, a couple of small fish. And somehow, don't ask me how it happened, somehow he blessed this bread. And he starts giving it to his disciples and they distribute it. And everybody ate everything they wanted, okay? So much so that he goes, hey, pick up the leftovers. Each of the 12 went around with a basket. They picked up 12 basketfuls of leftover pieces of bread and fish, okay? And then a little while later, another group gathered, 4,000 people. They spent days, okay? They're out in the middle of nowhere, okay? And Jesus said, if we send these people, the disciples, what happened was actually the disciples said, Jesus, let's get rid of these guys. It's time to go. We're wasted, man. We're tired. Send them on their way. And he said, we can't do it because they're going to faint on the way home. We have to feed them. And they're like, really? Are you kidding me? There's no bakeries around here. There's nothing going on. There's no towns. We're out in the middle of nowhere. He goes, what do you have? Kid's lunch. Again, just a couple loaves of bread, and they found a couple of small fish. He did his magic again. And somehow everybody got fed, and they picked up 7 basketfuls of leftovers. Then they went across the lake. Big lake. They rowed across the other side, got to this place called Dalmanutha, and they got over there, and there was a group of Pharisees over there, the cultural warriors. Okay, they were there, and Jesus was going to talk to them, but they said, "We want to see you do some magic tricks, otherwise we're not going to listen to you." And he said, "Guys, seriously," he talked to his buddies. He said, "We're out of here right now, post haste. Let's get in the boat. Let's go back across the lake. I'm not doing magic tricks for these guys." Okay, and so they got out and they're rowing back, and the text says they forgot to get bread except for one loaf. They're rowing back across the lake. Okay, and Jesus is sitting there, and I think what's going on is he's in his head. He's sitting there thinking about this movement that he's going to trust to these knuckleheads. Okay, and he knew they still didn't get it. They had not fully understood and embraced what it was that he came to bring into the world, and yet he was going to entrust them with this mission, this movement that he was creating. Like everybody else, they saw the cause in terms of the political and cultural things that were going on in the culture. Okay, and unless he could get them to this transformational point where their vision became clear, his movement was just going to align with whatever was going on in the culture of the day, and it was never going to accomplish what it was intended to do and what it was intended to bring into the world. So Jesus is thinking about all this stuff, and then just out of the blue, they're rowing and stuff, and and they're sitting there, and he goes, "Beware of the yeast of the Herodians." Those were the political ones, named after King Herod. Okay, the Roman ruler of the area. "Beware of the Herodians, the yeast of the Herodians. Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees," these cultural warriors. Okay, they didn't know what he meant. They start mumbling to each other. What? The yeast. Oh, the bread. Oh, we forgot to bring bread. He's ticked off because we only brought one loaf of bread, and it's like not enough. Oh my, whoa. And Jesus knew what they were thinking. And then he says, "Do you have eyes but fail to see? Do you have ears but fail to hear? Don't you remember? Don't you remember?" You see, they still weren't getting it. So he says, guys, okay. When we fed the 5,000, okay, how many basketfuls of leftovers did you pick up? 12. When we fed the 4,000, don't you remember? How many basketfuls of leftovers? 7. And what's implied is there's 13 of us in this boat. We got one loaf of bread. We fed 5,000 and 4,000 with a kid's lunch. What do you think I could have done with one loaf of bread? I'm not talking about the bread. His point was about the yeast. Okay, that was his main point. When yeast is added to bread, what happens? Right. It goes from being a tortilla to pan dulce, right? Right, or something like that. Right? Yeah, it's a tortas instead of a burrito, right? And when yeast is added to bread, the effect is pervasive, right? And once it's in there, it does its work. And then how do you get it out? You can't. It just changes the whole idea. And Jesus is saying, beware. Don't do it. Don't mix what I'm bringing into this world, okay, with some kind of political yeast, some kind of cultural yeast. Don't mix it in. Don't do it, okay? Because it'll change everything. And once it gets in there, it creates a whole different thing, okay? And because the church I'm coming to start has no enemies. No enemies. It is a target-rich environment, okay, but not in the way some people think about target-rich environments, right? It's a target-rich environment for people to find acceptance, compassion, truth, for a world of people to serve. Okay, that's what we bring into the world. Don't bring political types into my movement. Don't bring cultural warriors into my movement. That's not what it's about. Okay, don't bring that agenda. I have a different agenda. Because the church I'm starting never points fingers at somebody else and says, you're the problem. The church I'm starting is populated by people that can say, I'm the problem. It's me. I'm the one. I have my part in the problem we all face. And join us in letting go and learning of Him. You know, and there's a number of other examples and stuff, and we're going to look at a couple of them this morning, the time we have left. But what he said in chapter 8, verse 18, is going to get real tangible and concrete next for what happens after they get back across the lake. Do you have eyes to see? Okay. Do you have ears to hear? And he's saying, guys, you got to get this. You got to see right. Okay. And it's a very important comment because this is what happens next. They go to this place called Bethsaida. This is amazing how Jesus heals this guy. They brought him a blind man, okay, and they beg, and some people brought this blind man and they begged Jesus to heal him of his blindness, and they took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. Jesus takes this guy, wants to get away from the crowd. And he's going to do something for him. So what does he do? He hawks a loogie. He spits. This is a weird one. Okay? He spits, not on his hands and then rubbed it in his eyes. He spits in the guy's eyes. You didn't know Jesus did that kind of thing, huh? You know, and then he puts his hands on him. And he says, do you see? And he looked up and they said, I see people, but they're walking around like trees. I see a little bit. It's better, but it's not all the way yet. And then once more Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes, and then his eyes were opened. His sight was completely restored, okay? And he saw everything clearly, and then Jesus sent him on his way. Now, I think it's really significant that this healing happened at this point in Jesus' ministry to his disciples. And it's significant that this guy's physical eyes, okay, were restored in kind of a progressive process, a progressive manner of healing. It didn't happen all at once. It was like, I see a little clearer, and now I see really clear, okay? Because isn't that how it works for us? When we have to change our way of thinking, you know, when we have to see things in a different way, that's kind of a process, right? It doesn't just happen like that. Oh, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, that's not how it works. It's like, you know, maybe what that guy said might have some truth to it. I don't know. And then you see maybe a little more evidence, and you go, well, and these aha moments start piling up, and then maybe we come to a different conclusion about things, you know. And this healing was for this man's benefit, but I think it was also for the benefit of the disciples. And I'm gonna say this, I don't know if I can back this up fully, but the spit idea, okay, you ever talk to somebody and they spit on you? Kind of, you know, hey, I've done that before, you know, and this idea is Jesus is putting these words out there, okay? He's trying to give them spiritual perception, okay? Trying to get them to see differently with what's coming out of his mouth. In the same way what came out of his mouth healed the physical blindness, what comes out of his mouth, his words, can heal our spiritual and our moral blindness sometimes. And so Jesus is trying to get them to replace their preconceived ideas, okay, and replace it with his. He's trying to remove their blindness, okay, and to see the world in a different way. And here's what happened next. Okay, this is how he's going to start to try to cure their blindness. In verse 27, it says this: Jesus and his disciples then went on to these villages around Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked them, hey, what do the public opinion polls say about me? Who do people say that I am? What's the opinion out there on the street? And they said, well, there's basically three, okay? And some say that you're John the Baptist. Now, John the Baptist had been killed at this point and stuff. So it's kind of like he was the one that prepared the way for Jesus. Okay, he was God's messenger that kind of prepared the way. And he'd been killed. So the first opinion is you're kind of like John the Baptist, maybe his reincarnation almost. Okay, that idea. Okay, and second opinion, you're like the prophet Elijah. Okay, Elijah was one of the greatest prophets, spokespersons for God in the whole Older Testament era. And the last book of the Older Testament predicted that someone like Elijah was going to come to prepare the way for this one that was going to change everything. Okay, this one known as the Messiah or the Christ. And so that's the other opinion that's floating around out there. And the third opinion of you is that you're just one of the prophets. It's been 400 years since we had a prophet walking around in this land. And think about it, 400 years. Okay, how old is the United States? 200 and change, right? And 400 years since we've had someone doing the kinds of things that you're doing. And so you're like a prophet of old. And he said, yeah, okay, so those are the public opinions. What is your opinion? Who do you say that I am? And Peter answered, he often spoke for the group. He said, you are the Christ. You're the Messiah in Hebrew. It'd be more Messiah. You're the Christ. And you're the one we've been expected. You're the anointed one of God. You're the one that was going to come in and be the go-between God and mankind. You're the one that's come to be the king, to be our ruler. And the idea is that you're the one who's chosen by God, okay, set apart for God's service to accomplish what only God can do, and that's to fix all that's wrong in this broken world. And the Older Testament spoke of this one that was going to come, that was going to be like a priest, this between God and man, that be like a king that was going to set up his rule and establish this perfect kingdom where goodness always prevailed and that was going to be great, prosperous, and never ending. Okay, and all that was true, but people started. What happened to this idea of the Christ and the Messiah in these ancient times was people started to impose their own ideas on what this was going to mean. Okay, remember, the Romans are in the land, and Israel was controlled by this occupying army, and so what people were looking for was they were looking for this one that was going to be sent by God to kick the Romans out and to reestablish the greatness of Israel. They were looking for a patriotic, revolutionary leader, a nationalistic one that was going to be a political leader and would rally the people and lead the violent overthrow of the Romans. And here's the thing. Jesus purposefully distanced himself from this term, Messiah or Christ, okay? He purposely did it. So when they identified him as the Christ, Jesus warned them. He says this in verse 30. He warned them not to tell anybody. So he said, the fourth opinion is the right opinion, but I don't want you talking to people about this, okay? Because I'm not going to let the label get stuck on me because of the way it's been redefined, okay? And so then he began to teach them about the Son of Man. So Jesus, what he did, and we see this all through Mark's account, is he referred to himself not as the Messiah or the Christ. He referred to himself as the Son of Man, okay, which was also a term from the Older Testament that had the same ideas associated with it, but it wasn't as popularized. And so he put this label on himself, and it was his favorite way of referring to himself because it didn't have all the baggage, the baggage that people had put on the term. And now he's going to continue the laborious process of trying to re-educate these guys, help them to see a different idea, okay? And so he starts teaching them. He says, the Son of Man, okay, me, is going to have to suffer many things. It's going to be a hard road. And you guys think the culture is saying it's just going to be this prevailing, high road of victory and all this kind of stuff. It's going to involve suffering. And the Son of Man is going to be rejected by the religious establishment, by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. And as a matter of fact, these religious, moralistic people, okay, are going to kill the Son of Man. And after 3 days, though, I'm going to rise again. I'm going to rise again. Well, this was upsetting to them. And so here's what happened. Verse 32. It says that Jesus kept talking plainly about what was going to happen, okay, and who the Messiah really was and how this was going to work. And Peter took him aside. He said, Jesus, you got to stop saying stuff like that. The text says he rebuked him. He said, you can't say stuff like that. You're freaking everybody out. You can't do that. That's just wrong. Okay? And you got to stop saying stuff like that. You've been saying stuff like that, and now you're here doing it again. But then Jesus turned, and it says that he saw that the others had seen what Peter had just done. Okay? And he looked at his disciples, and then Jesus just jumped Peter's stuff. This is what he said. Check it out. Get behind me, Satan. Yeah. Pretty strong words, right? Get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of man. Now, what was going on here was Peter's comment was reflective of the prevailing cultural attitude of what the Messiah was going to bring in to the world. And this idea of a suffering Messiah was unthinkable. Okay? This is not how this was going to work. This was going to be a victory march, and the Messiah was supposed to be strong, not weak, not submissive. And Peter was asking Jesus, what he was asking really to do was to bypass the death that Jesus came into the world to do the deed. Because it's somehow in the alchemy of God, it was required that a sacrifice be made, a perfect sacrifice be made, the penalty of our sin be paid so that we get a pass. And this is exactly what Satan had asked Jesus to do in the temptation of the wilderness, if you remember that. He said, I'm going to give you all the glory and stuff. You just have to submit yourself to me to go. You don't have to go through the cross and all that stuff. And this becomes the tipping point. This becomes, this moment when Jesus just jumps Peter's stuff, this becomes kind of the tipping point when Jesus is now going to just really, really try to drive into these guys' heads to reveal progressively this idea that you need to see differently. You need to see differently. So Jesus bores into these guys, trying to cure their blindness. In verse 33, he's telling them, you got to move from a man-centered outlook to a God-centered point of view. Okay? And he said, Jesus turned, he looked down at his disciples, and said, you do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. You got to turn your awareness to him. You need a corrective lens, right? I remember I figured out I needed glasses, okay? Now I figured it out. I was playing over the line a bunch. And I kept lining up for the fly ball, fly right over my head. It happened, but I'm just like throwing my glove, I need glasses. I did need glasses. Peter is needing corrective lenses. Okay, and then Jesus says this: we have to move from this idea of a vision of self-preservation, okay, to a vision of self-sacrifice. Okay, from self-gratification to self-denial. He says this. He said, if anyone is going to come after me, you have to deny yourself. It's not about standing on your rights. It's about sometimes surrendering your rights for the welfare of someone else. And he said, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. The way cross-bearing worked was a person who was going to be crucified would have to take the cross member of their cross and carry it themselves out to the place of execution. As you were walking through that town, going to that place of execution, you might walk by your home. Well, it's still your home, but it has a whole different idea associated with it now, right? You might walk by your place of business, which is still yours, You might walk by your bank. That money is still yours. But now in light of your destiny, it takes on a different level of significance, right? You know, and that's the idea. In Italy, they have this place, there's a bridge in Venice called the Bridge of Sighs. And what it does is it goes from the courthouse to the place of execution. And the idea is that when a prisoner would walk across that bridge, he would sigh because he knew his life was over. In the same way, Jesus is saying, hey, you know, listen, as you walk through this life, it's not about demanding cultural and political power. That's not what I've come to bring into the world, okay? That's not the way of the cross. The way of the cross is self-denial, not demanding your rights, okay? But instead saying, hey, I'm here. I got a whole different perspective on life now, and I'm just here to make a difference. I'm just here to serve and to give myself to others. So he wants them to move from a place of self-gratification to self-denial, from self-preservation to a place of self-sacrifice. Next, he says this: whoever wants to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for me and for this gospel's sake, this message I'm bringing into the world, will save it. Okay? The idea is don't try to hold on to your life. How does that work? I can't die! Death rate's still hovering right around 100%. It hasn't changed and stuff. And he's saying, see that. Understand that, right? You know, the difference between it's the difference between being a seagull, okay, and a goose, okay? Seagulls. Have you watched seagulls? Okay, what do seagulls do? They squawk. They fight. They go for every little scrap of food they can find, right? You've seen them out there at the shore, you know? Just they go down to that bag of French fries and just start tearing it apart, and they're yelling at each other, and they fly away, and you know, with the bag, and then everybody chases them and stuff, and just get whatever you can, right? Geese, on the other hand, they're not noble creatures, but you know, when they migrate, there's a sense of cooperation that happens there, right? You know, we know because we've interviewed geese on how they do this, but geese do this, though. They trade places in the flock, okay? As they're flying, you know, where's the hardest place to fly? At the front, okay? And so somebody will get in there. Okay, guys, I'm going to do this stuff. Line up behind me. You know, okay, here we go. I can't do this anymore. Okay, you know, Tony, you take the spot. You know, you know, and then let me get to the back where the air's getting cut and stuff. And they help each other. They're cooperative and stuff. And what else do? They honk, right? And we believe, you know, we can't really interview them, but we believe it's bringing encouragement. They don't squawk at each other. They're not like yelling at each other. They're saying, "Oh, you know, we can do this, guys. We got this. We got this." Okay? And that's the idea, that we're supposed to help each other in this regard. Help us get through the tough stuff of life, you know? And then in verse 36 and 37, he talks about the difference between short-term investments and long-term investing. He says, "For what good is it for a man to gain the whole world? At the end of the day, you lose your soul." What good is it? You got all this stuff. Oh yeah, you seagulled it. You know, you got all the French fries. Well, what about the important thing? What about the real you? Because Jesus says, what can a person give in exchange for their soul? And finally, he talks about how there's a place that leads to shame, and there's a place that leads to acceptance. He says, if anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him when he comes back in his Father's glory. This idea of him, he is going to come back triumphantly one day with all of his holy angels and put away all that's wrong in this world and make things completely right. Because that's part of the program. Jesus offered a different vision and a cure for our moral blindness. And he offered hope that's transcendent. He offered life that doesn't end. And he taught his followers to engage the world for sure. Get out there and make a difference in the world, but never put your hope in it. Don't put your hope there. Place your hope in me. And those who believed this teaching became a part of this movement unexpectedly, I think, in a lot of ways. They ended up being blown away at the influence that came through them. And then they turn offered this transcendent hope and love and all that he came to bring to other people. And he started this movement that's called the church. The church. The Church of Jesus Christ. The church in our culture right now, it has a pretty bad name. It does. Especially among younger people. And you know what? It's well earned, that negative name. But it's not what Jesus came to bring. The values of the church, okay, are meant to lift people up. We give people acceptance, okay? We accept others. Why? Because we found acceptance, right? Wherever somebody's at in their journey, all that is their starting point. We all had a starting point. So why are we going to bag on somebody for their starting point? I'm not going to bag on you for your starting point. Your starting point is your starting point. Okay? Let's do this. Let's honk. Let's do this. Let's go. We show compassion. Why? Because we've received compassion. Amen. And we pass it on. It's that simple. Okay? We find freedom in truth. We're not afraid of it. Because there's freedom there. And because the truth has set us free. So we offer it to other people. There really is such a thing as truth. Really. And we serve. We express these values through acts of service, okay, to other people, because values without actions are just words. They're worthless at the end of the day. Father, we just thank you for the acceptance we found in Christ. Teach us how to offer acceptance to others, no matter where they're coming from. Lord, teach us how to show compassion, because, man, you loved us. Why wouldn't we pass that on? Reveal to us your truth. Set us free. And help us to lead other people in understanding and knowing your truth so that they can walk in the freedom that it brings. And Lord, give us practical ways this week. Show us how we can serve others and live out these values that you came to establish to your church. Help us see, Lord. Hey, at Ridgeview Church, we're trying to learn how to live our one and only lives with passion for God and compassion for others. We hope you'll join us. If it's safe for you to come in person, we meet at our Lake Wolford Road campus in Valley Center, California at 9:30 a.m. on Sunday mornings. We'd love to see you. We just have the greatest time together. It's super fun. We have a great group of people. If it's not safe for you to do that quite yet, hey, continue to watch online, and we thank you for your financial support. You can see on the screen the different kinds of options you have to support our ministry financially. God bless you, and have a great week.
Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, a fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be a shadow where I hide, a ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. You are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, for you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, let the King of my heart be a wind inside my sails, the anchor in the never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me